I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So we do have our KMUG session today, or what's known as Knowledge Management User Group. I know that some folks have been in this session before and been with it for a while. We've had it for about a year or so, or more, and Jamie Honecker was leading it from then. And it has transitioned over to me, and we are doing this on a quarterly cadence. I'm trying to do this more than quarterly and kind of balance that out. But for right now, you'll see this on a quarterly cadence, and I'll put the invites out on the community. But again, this one's more of an informational session based on feedback that we got around AI search through a knowledge management lens. So let me go ahead and just go through a little housekeeping here. A lot of this information is already available. It's already in the product, but, through questions and through some forward-looking slides, we might have forward-looking statements. So just a friendly reminder to not make any purchasing decisions based upon the material that we present today. And before I hand it off to our speakers, I did want to just cover the agenda at a high level. So Gerard and Shamus are here with us today, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. But they're going to cover, an AI search introduction of what that is. They have some really great best practices in regards to relevancy cheat sheets, how to handle multi-language and multi-geo content. Then they're going to get into some newer content with Now Assist and AI search. And then at the end, I'm going to kind of tie that together with knowledge management and provide some best practices that you can do for knowledge authoring and governance, and even looking forward to the future with Gen AI. Just some best practices that you may already be using or can start incorporating today to make your searches better and kind of align into what Gerard and Shamus will be speaking to. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to y'all's team, Gerard and Shamus, if you want to go ahead and take over screen sharing.
I will need to advance my slides to catch up with you, so please give me one moment to do that. And while I do that, I just want to quickly introduce myself. First of all, thank you, Ashley, and for everyone who asked to get us all here today to talk through AI search and some of the knowledge management and how they intertwine as part of that process. So my name is Gerard Dwan. I'm a product success architect that focuses on AI search. To help out, I know Shamus, do you want to introduce yourself as well? We are peers, so it's a lot of like for like in terms of introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Gerard. Shamus Mulhall here again on the product success team. Just here to help facilitate adoption and hopefully provide some guidance on our best practices. Thanks.
Awesome. Great. So to get started, and as part of this introduction to AI search, we really want to talk about how really end consumer experiences and expectations have changed. Years ago, people were going to Google, the early days of Google and Yahoo, and if you go far enough back, Alta Vista, you type in a keyword and you get a list of results, and you're happy with that, a list of links that will take you to somewhere that you hope is relevant. And so in the ServiceNow journey, we started with much similar technology, right? If you enter a keyword, you could get that KB article that you're looking for. Over the course of time, we've made an investment in AI search, which really provides a little bit more of that consumer grade experience. So we can obviously search against the things that are on the ServiceNow platform, including your knowledge base, including your catalog items that may be supporting your end users. We also do things like all of the natural language processing that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later. We've also come up with this idea of a genius result, which highlights the most relevant information based on the type of question or query that the end user is asking or providing. And on top of those things, the AI part, right? We want to make sure that this is learning over time. So in a sense, it is self-tuning. It's readjusting the set of results, the order of the results to make it more relevant to the types of questions that a specific organization is asking. But that's not enough anymore. now we're in a space where technologies like ChatGPT, sort of generative AI, and more conversational technology has become part of our everyday life. And for that, we want to make sure that we incorporate some of that technology as well. And that's where analysis in AI search comes in. We're providing a more conversational style of question, providing specific answers based on the knowledge base articles that AI search has access to. While we're talking about this initial setup, let's go into how AI search has been used so far and what our customers are seeing. From a broad perspective, there are a couple of things that we want to consider. First, we're seeing in combination in comparison to Zing search, we're seeing a more relevant experience. We have a hero metric called average click position, and we're seeing that we're getting, from a holistic perspective, of roughly 2.5 average click position. Basically, the closer to 1 we get, the better the overall search quality is, which basically means end users are most commonly clicking on things. You can think of it as what it literally is, average click position, most commonly clicking on things in the position of 1, 2, 3, which is great. We think a good search experience is anything that is 3 or better. So overall, great lift from our customer base. On top of that, we'd like to see a good click-through rate, which basically means people are finding what they're looking for. In aggregate, we're seeing roughly a 70% click-through rate among our customers, which again is great. On top of these things, right, if that wasn't enough for you, if you're leveraging virtual agent as part of your end user experience, there's actually a drastic drop in the amount of configuration or intents or tuning that's needed in order to get a good experience from that if you use AI search as a fallback. So overall, things are looking up from an AI search perspective based on the customers that are using it so far. Now, I'm not going to go into every possible feature that exists in AI search. I just want to highlight a couple of quick things. When we think about AI search, we really want to categorize the benefits or the feature set into 3 pillars. The first is natural. We want there to be this consumer-like that we've already talked about experience. And in order to do that, we've created things like typo handling and auto-suggesting spelling corrections. We've done things like creating that question answering capability that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. We also want to make sure that it's smart. And by smart, we mean leveraging the latest AI capabilities that exist. And so while it started with machine learning tuning for relevancy, it is going further into that generative AI space that, again, we'll talk about as we go forward. On top of these things, we also want to make sure that it's easy to use, easy to configure for administrators. So because of that, everything is streamlined. It's in largely the same place to configure everything. And the hope is that once you configure it, you're pretty much good to go. So that's the 3 primary pillars around AI search that we'd like to get to. Before I move on to some of our relevancy cheat sheets and best practices, are there any open questions at this point? Great. If while we're talking, a question springs to mind, do feel free to use the Q&A function because Shamus and I are going to be going back and forth, and we should be able to help support that as part of that process. So here we go. Very common in knowledge management is this idea of KCS, or knowledge-centered service. I will admit we took this graphic directly from the Consortium for Service Innovation. So I know that's something that actually we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later. But when we think about authoring content for knowledge, a lot of the same practices can be used from a KCS perspective to ensure that you're creating highly relevant search content. And so we took a little excerpt, we sort of changed around some of the verbiage here, but the idea is that we want to create content that solves a problem. We want to make sure that we evolve the content based on usage. We'll talk a little bit about that later. We want to make sure that we keep the knowledge base up to date with all of the collective experiences that we've had. And then we also need to make sure that we're taking into account learning, collaboration, sharing, and ultimately improving the overall experience. So what we're going to go into initially here is really that solve loop. So how do we capture, structure, reuse, and improve? And then we'll actually touch a little bit on the evolve loop when we talk about search analytics. So the much anticipated relevancy cheat sheet. I know can I give you more tables? I want to call out that this is as of this month. This is as of right now in terms of however our relevancy works. So there are possibilities that we change this approach slightly in order to better satisfy the overall customer needs. So this is as of 2023, your out of the box relevancy, what's measured and what's important. It may come as a surprise. So I'm going to focus on this table. This table. There are two categories of features for AI search relevancy. The categories of features are basically relying on some type of match. So matches to customer queries, right? Specific terms or words or synonyms that they've used against one of these fields, right? The other category of feature, I'm saying that in air quotes, is this idea of an article characteristic. So basically things that are independent of matches on a specific article. And so the things that are independent, I'm going to start there, are the freshness, how recently was it created or updated. And then the other article characteristic is the popularity. So how often was a specific article viewed or used, right? View count or use count. These two things, unless there's an insane difference in freshness or use count, view count, these you can consider tiebreakers for the other options. Great question in the chat. I'm about to touch on that. These are in order of how important they are for relevancy. So by that, I mean matches on KB number. This is a knowledge-specific feature where if you type in a KB number, we want to make sure that you get that KB number, that article that is that KB at the top of the list, assuming you don't have exact matching turned on. So we absolutely want to make sure that's first. So that's very highly weighted. The very next, from a weighting perspective, is the title or a short description of a knowledge-based article. And so as you might imagine, and this aligns with what end users are expecting, if somebody looks for a specific set of keywords, they expect that there's some type of match on the short description. Additionally, after that, we look at the article body. So we really want to make sure that the content aligns with something that exists within there. And then finally, there is this keywords feature, which basically looks at your knowledge meta or tags if you have indexed your tags. The interesting thing about this is that we are using sort of a best of breed relevancy model. And so I don't want to go into a crazy amount of detail on that, but the way that it works is close to your traditional TF-IDF, which if you're super interested in it, you can take a look at that in more detail. It's the latest iteration of that is called BM25, and basically it's trying to measure how much the result that we're looking to present is like the query that has been passed to us. So as you might imagine, shorter pieces of information will likely appear to be more relevant than much longer text as a percentage of text. So there's lots of interesting things going on there. I'm going to pause for a moment just to look at some of the Q&A because I saw a bunch pop up, and I think it's really important to understand this a little bit more. So let me just take a look here. We do have questions in both chat and Q&A. I am going to lean on the Q&A side. So we had a participant ask, are keywords back in use for a user to input, or is that keywords that AI puts in? So keywords, as mentioned on the slide, are the fields that are the information that's associated with either the meta field on the article or the tags that are part of that if that has been indexed. So that's a great question. So another participant asked, can you discuss how you calculate relevancy for non-KM content, for example, community catalog items, and so on? We do, it's very similar. So as you may not be aware, but we do provide a unified list of results by default. It's basically our all tab, and we'll take a look at that in a little demo later. The all tab basically correlates all the information that you have, all the different types of information that you have for a specific interface or experience. So we'll use very similar features. They're actually nearly identical. We just don't use KB or popularity. And so there is sort of an evening out or a flowing of information because title and content are so heavily used for relevancy. So that's just, it does end up being a pretty round curve in terms of relevancy. We had another question come in that really talks about some of the formatting of the document. So the document formatting, and this is items with an article body get weighted differently if they're using bold for words or headings, and does the article body also include text and attachments? So this is a great question. There is nuance here. So the article body is the text field of the knowledge base article. There is not an account today for formatting that exists within there. So a bolded word has the same power as an unbolded term or word. The interesting thing about attachments. Attachments are separate documents in AI search or separate results. The interesting thing is that in Vancouver going forward, we created a nesting result for attachments. And so what we're doing from a relevancy perspective is setting the max relevancy for the combination of the two as the relevancy of that result. And so if you have very good matches and a very good title match and a very good content match in your attachment, then you will see that knowledge base article sort of swim up to the top it's considered a separate document, but when they're combined, it's the max value. Previous to Vancouver, it's just a separate search result. So it's a little bit different from an attachment perspective. We had another question. Out of the box meta is not indexed by AI search. Does anyone advise switching this on? Our meta is very heavily influenced by previous use in Zing. Great question. There was a time where AI search did not index meta by default. The latest, I believe it's as of San Diego, actually, is that we are including meta. A good way to check whether that is the case for you is to check if you're under your indexed source, you explicitly do not index meta, and that would be under your field settings and mappings within your index source for AI search. We have a couple of good questions. I'm going to hold off on one of the questions. I'm going to answer the other one. The question is, if using article templates, is the SEO description tag field used? To answer that question, we are. So by default, we index everything, which means you can get an answer or basically a result based on any part of the information that's in the article from any field. And so we would still use that from a matching perspective. It may not be used from a relevancy perspective unless it's mapped to meta or another field that carries relevancy weight. Okay, I'm going to hold off on one question. So now that we've talked about the out-of-the-box relevancy model, and we had some great questions, I really appreciate everyone's participation there. We're going to talk about what happens after the out-of-the-box relevancy, right? We talked about tuning that is sort of hands-off. So what does that look like? Well, that's part of what the AI and AI search is for. So ML relevancy allows us to re-rank the results in organic search, so basically using that search result list, based on aggregated user behavior, based on everything that's been going on that system. And this is on a per search profile basis. And so this would answer the question in Q&A, where searches for both Employee Center and regular service portal, the out-of-the-box relevancy model will be the same, but on an ongoing basis, unless they're using the same search profile, they may diverge. The other areas that we use AI, I'm not going to touch on, with the exception of the new and improved Now Assistant AI search, which uses large language models in order to ask questions based on the content that's available in the knowledge base and knowledge base articles. But when we talk about aggregated user behavior, what is that aggregated user behavior? The aggregated user behavior is basically our clicks, right? Our clicks are the goal in aggregate to understand what users are finding helpful. And so you can see here, a click for us is basically a signal or an indication that we've done something right for this search result specifically. And so there's been a lot of questions when I talk to this about whether or not this means that if I click on the fourth result for this query over and over and over and over again, will it become the first result? The answer is it's complicated. Maybe. And what I mean by that is when we click on that, yes, we do get a signal that this information is relevant for this query. But what we're actually doing is bringing in all of the information that would tell us that this is a relevant result and aggregating that So what that means is when we click, there is some indication of how helpful the title was. There's some indication of how helpful the content was. There's some indication of how helpful that keyword or the tags or meta were. There's some indication of how the freshness and popularity influenced that click. On top of these things, on top of what's available in the out-of-the-box model, we also consider the source of the information that information came from. So as an example, we may see that using a specific template, most of the articles, when they're clicked using that template, are more highly relevant. And so they may be weighted slightly more. So this isn't a case where necessarily, clicking on the fourth result will make it come to the top over and over and over again. But it is the case that if everybody's clicking on the fourth result, then there's something about that fourth result that makes it relevant. And you can see over time that would come up. We got a great question. It's pseudo ML related. We got a question about, is there a way to manually weight an article so it'll be the first result? We have a number of tools available to do that. What we have talked about so far is basically the hands-off approach, the ML relevancy-based approach to making sure that we're getting the most relevant knowledge content. The other option that is available, or I guess an additional lever that we have, is our result improvement rules. And so there's a number of ways to make sure that articles bubble up to the top. And they include things like boosting. So you can say specific KB categories are important, and we want to make sure that they sort of bubble up to the top. We also have the ability to promote a specific knowledge base article, whether that's for a specific query, set of queries, or set of users. So there is a lot of flexibility there. We've also had a couple of customers toy around with the idea of creating a highlighted article. And so you can basically boost or promote, or you can boost based on whether an article is in your highlighted article set. So sort of a nice range of capabilities that are available to you via result improvement rules, which are really the way that admins can sort of update the lever, change the relevancy on their own way. I'm going to touch on one more slide, and then I will get to a couple of questions, and I'll be passing it over to Shamus, just being mindful of the time that we have here. So when we talk about, actually, I think this is more on the solve loop. No, it's in the evolve loop. It's important to know that AI search does come with AI search analytics. This is available via a store app called the Advanced Management Tools for AI Search. I get the word order wrong sometimes there, but if you enter those words in your apps, you'll be able to find it. The nice part about AI search analytics is that it tracks most of the important things that we are looking for from an overall quality perspective. And it also, when we look at the evolve loop, it tells us a little bit about our content health and tells us about the performance of the information or the types of queries that we're having and the types of results people are seeing. The three things that I wanted to call out were average click position. We talked about that a little bit already. We have a goal of 3 or less is really a good search experience. And you can see basically a breakdown of where people are clicking on information. We have queries with no clicks, which basically tells us that people are getting information presented to them, but they're basically abandoning their search, right? It's sort of like a cart abandonment problem. And then on top of that, we have the queries with no results, which could indicate to us that there's a missing keyword, right? There could be the end users are asking questions in a way that the system is not expecting, and so we may need to do some tuning there. Or we're basically just missing an article. So it's sort of an interesting sort of content hole, perhaps, content gap. Okay, and with that, I'm going to pause really briefly. I see a few questions have come in, and then we'll hand it off to Shamus to talk about some of the multi-geo, multilingual situations here. So, first question, I'm going to stick with Q&A first. The first question is, can we segment users based on criteria, for example, geography on the AI Search Analytics dashboard? This is a great question. Because we aggregate data in this way, we tend to not have user-specific context as part of the AI Search Analytics dashboard. This is a request that we have been getting recently. So we have been working sort of the broader product team for AI search on how we can address this problem while maintaining all of the GDPR standards, for example. So we are in the process of looking at that. It is not something that's available today. Another great question. Search behaves very differently depending on whether you search for one word or more than one word. Resubmit search using and if it does not find enough results. But this is very difficult to diagnose when issues happen. It's a comment on the behavior that I appreciate. Yes, we do have and or resubmission, which basically enough for us is a full page of results. And that is a configurable setting. So you can say, I want 10 results or I want 20 results. The more results that you request, the more likely you're going to get your and or resubmission, which is a bit fuzzier, right? As from a result perspective. I will say that in the Washington timeframe, and this is our safe harbor, in the Washington timeframe, we are making an and or enhanced setting, which basically doesn't resubmit for 2-term queries. From our experience, the and or works fairly well for 3 or more terms. But for 2-term queries, it gets a little bit fuzzy because we're only counting on 1 term to match, whereas if it's a 3-term query, we're relying on 2 and so on. So that's definitely something that we've considered as well. And I think you'll find that we are making enhancements to that going forward. If you do have an issue that you're trying to resolve with that, I would recommend using the search preview, which is part of the same plugin or app that AI Search Analytics is involved in or is bundled with. This is a great question. Can we promote the articles based on all user attributes, like if a person is on maternity leave, show the maternity leave policy on top? That's a great question. We, from a user attribution perspective, we use just the out of the box fields that are on that sysuser table and are passed as part of user context. So I don't believe like maternity leave is on there. But if there's some attribution that you use, like that's on that default sysuser table, it could be possible. But yes, that there is for each result improvement rule, there's basically a trigger condition that could be based on user context, the type of query that they're submitting, and so on. It's a good question. Another question is, after developing search solutions in lower environments, are solutions migrated to production instances by means of update sets or by source control? This has been a very broad AI search discussion. I'm very happy that we were able to make it. It really is based on the end customer's migration strategy. I will say that you can absolutely use an update set. You can absolutely use source control. We don't have a preference from an AI search perspective, but what we would recommend is occasionally cloning down from production. The reality is the data in production is always different. So the synonyms that you may need to use are going to be different in production than in lower environments. Just as an example. In addition to that, production is really the only place that will have the click information that we can aggregate for machine learning relevancy. And so your production instance is likely to have a different relevancy model than your lower environments unless you go through the process of some type of cloning process downwards. So it's just an important thing to note. I think it was a great question around the promotion or migration strategy for AI search. With that, I would like to hand over to Shamus to talk a little bit about some of the gotchas, right? We're calling them for language and geo.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that, Gerard. And certainly this has been a great interactive discussion here. This is great to see all these questions. So yeah, we'll certainly be touching on some of the stuff that Gerard has alluded to with result improvement rules and content and filtering and our language support. So if we jump into our next slide here, yeah, just want to be kind of as straightforward as we can be, in that our default behavior for AI search will essentially only surface content in the user's preferred language, or the session language itself. So that's just sort of our out-of-the-box behavior. So if we look at our next slide and look at the language content support that we have, again, sorry, looking at a bit of an eye chart here, but we'll keep it in here for reference. But want to call out that users essentially will benefit from a number of language processing features for our 7 languages, including Japanese and the traditional and simplified Chinese. With recent improvements actually to our Japanese tokenization in our Vancouver release, while all the other supported languages still certainly benefit from a majority of the language processing capabilities like synonyms, stop words, and result improvement rules that we've spoke about before. So if we look at the search of searching in our multiple languages, sorry, we really want to make sure everybody's eyesight has been tested on all these last couple of slides. But again, this will be helpful for reference. And here want to mention some of the highlights of essentially the evolution of our multi-language support or search capabilities, with the most widely used being our global fallback. And so when you enable this global fallback option, AI search matches records in the language from the Now platform instance locale, as well as matching records in the user's session language. So as an example, if you set English as your global fallback, users searching in a Japanese session can see knowledge article results in both obviously Japanese as well as English, with that being their fallback. But if we look at our Vancouver improvement, so if we look at the next slide, we focus on sort of the continued evolution of that multilingual or multi-language support in Vancouver. We have a new country to language form, and this will allow admins to expand the recall of knowledge article searches for country users by specifying additional knowledge article search languages for a particular country. Now, that sounds like a bit of a word salad there, but the example that I'll give here is, if you have a knowledge article search languages for French and English, and you specify that for your country of Japan, with that mapping configured, that country to language mapping in place, a user searching from a Japanese session can see search results for knowledge articles in English and French, as well as our Japanese articles. So it allows for that mapping of languages to countries without having to do anything specific to the articles themselves. So that kind of leads us into our default geographic behavior. And again, looking to be as straightforward as possible here. The default geographic behavior is that there's really no filtering or out of the box boosting based on our geographic location. And because of that, we've put together some guidance on essentially how to accomplish that. So here we'll look at, again, an additional AI search feature that Gerard has already spoken about, called result improvement rules. And this feature essentially allows you to enable boosting content dynamically based on the KB article country and the search user's country designation. In this example here, actually, you can see the result improvement rule is going to boost knowledge content where the country code on the content matches the search user's country from the sys user table. This example is fully documented in a community article that we'll certainly share here and will be part of this presentation. So essentially, when these rules are activated, AI search increases the relevancy for search results from that index source specified in the action. We can see here, this happens to be the knowledge table, where those conditions match. We see here the country code on the knowledge content is matching the searcher's country. So the set of results won't change, but the ranking within that result set does get changed. And the reason that's interesting is that will actually impact what content gets processed for our Genius results. And there's been some sort of alluding to what Genius results are. Essentially what happens is, if you're not familiar with Genius results, they're what AI search considers sort of this best answer to a query, and it'll provide sort of an actionable result. And what that will do is it sort of leads us into our discussion of, what really Now Assist for search is actually doing and the expanded capabilities there. So if we look at our next slide, and brings us into our new capabilities, and I'm sure we're all recognizing that ServiceNow has a strong generative AI strategy aiming at accelerating productivity and transforming that experience. And this Now Assist for search is sort of at the forefront of that initiative. And we talk about how it works, and we'll show it in action here as well as part of a demo. So what Now Assist for search is it uses this retrieval augmented generation architecture, or RAG architecture. Again, I certainly understand that it's a terrible acronym, but this really means that we're using search to focus that generative AI model on vetted content. So this connects back to what I had mentioned in the previous slide, that these result improvement rules allow you to influence the content that is most relevant by providing that boost action on those results based on geo or language boosting. And the benefits of this, the architecture, this RAG architecture, by using the search to focus the generative AI response, or looking for answers, it's less likely to hallucinate. So it's using that vetted KB article to focus the response of the generative AI model on that content specifically. And that also allows for it essentially allows us to generate, domain and company specific answers without actually having to retrain that model, because it is using that vetted content. It also enables our AI applications to benefit from, obviously, ServiceNow's security, because AI search does pay attention and adhere to all the security requirements and that are actually already in place for knowledge content surfacing. So again, we've sort of talked a lot here, and this might be a good time to answer some questions, and it'll lead us into sort of a live demo of our AI search and Now Assist for search capabilities. Well, let's take a look at some of the questions that we have here. as well as being able to boost on the country. Can you boost on office location? That's certainly, so what we're doing is we're using those user context. So from the sys user table, we're pulling out most of the out of the box fields there. So if that is available on the sys user as well as the KB content, then yeah, you could follow the same process that is being used in that community article that we shared to boost that content. Can AI search automatically identify the language of articles in the search results and add dynamic facets? So facets are going to, they won't necessarily be dynamic based on the language. They'll be based on the session language. Let's see. Does Now Assist work only in English? So yes, right now our Now Assist for Search capability only supports English. Again, safe harbor, that is certainly one of the things that we're trying to expand upon, is to incorporate additional languages there for sure. And
Shamus, do you want to, I know we're getting low on time. Do we want to move into the demo? I posted in the chat. If we can't get to y'all's comments live, we'll circle back around and answer them async, and then they will be posted to the comments of this event. So we'll make sure that we get all these questions answered and get them to you.
wonderful. Thanks, Ashley. Yes, I think that's probably a good idea. And Gerard, do you want to lead us through that?
Absolutely. So I will admit that this is a live demonstration. And so I want to put that out there. And per usual, there's always some type of authentication or caching issue. So I'm going to do my best to walk through this live. So this is demonstrating the analysis for search capabilities. While we didn't review it earlier, it is important to note that Now Assist for Search is available in both, and the experiences including global search on the back end of ServiceNow platform, portal, so anything that's service portal based, as well as virtual agent. So with that being said, if I am on the back end, and you'll see the experiences are very similar, front end, back end, virtual agent. If I do a search for example, is there a patch for Tokyo? This type of content is available. The content that's available on the system is really just generic ServiceNow information. That's a little bit dated, but we're going to just look beyond that. So a couple of things to mention as we see this information come to light. First and foremost, it turns out while I was typing my query, I had a misspelling. So you can see here, is there a patch for actually put in Tokro? It saw that, hey, there's actually a word in your index that's very similar to Tokro. It's Tokyo. You don't have any match for Tokro. After the spelling correction came through, we actually got this Now Assist based Genius result that provides a clear answer to my question. Is there a patch? Yes, there is a patch. And this is where the article that it was extracted from. So I know there was a question earlier about Genius results not presenting themselves. You may be using our existing Q&A based Genius results that do leverage knowledge content. The reality is that relied so heavily on content structure and precise question and answering available in the article that we may have missed it more often than not. Now Assist for Search does have a little bit more of a conversational appeal, and it also has the ability to understand a little bit more about the article that we're referencing when we look at these types of questions. Now, again, I mentioned that this is based on some generic ServiceNow content. And so with that in mind, I'm going to go, in this case, to my Employee Center portal. Again, this will work in any service portal-based portal. I'm submitting a query for how do I set up my email. And you can see here, I'm getting a Now Assist in AI search result for the steps to set up my email in a way that's consumable. So I can just look at it, and if I need more detail, I can go into a little bit more information as part of that process. I will also say that one of the things that we talked about was the reduced time to set up our virtual agent and the intents. So if I were to ask another question, again, related to ServiceNow, how do I change my banner logo? And I asked that in a virtual agent context, you'll see that I get a very similar experience as in the portal experience, which is I'm going to get a Now Assist Genius result that enumerates the steps specifically, and then provides the source information should I want to go in and do a little bit more analysis on what this article is about. So we're providing more actionable information to our end users, and we're making it so that it's consumable so people don't have to go through this process. We're also, from a knowledge management perspective, reducing the authoring time or basically content cleanup time that's needed to get at this information, right? From the traditional Q&A that we had previously. So that is my rapid fire demo, and I know we only have a few minutes left. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Ashley, would you like to go over some of the knowledge management best practices at this point, or should we pause for a couple more Q&A? What's your read?
Let me go through these slides. If we need to run over for the recording's sake and folks can stay, that would be awesome. I just want to make sure for the recording that we do get this content in. And then if we do have some questions after this, we can go ahead and field those outside of this section. But so I have a few slides here. They're not too deep and too heavy in content. Really just kind of summarizing some knowledge management best practices, viewing knowledge management from the lens of search. And what Gerard and Shamus have spoken to. So, when they are speaking to relevancy matching and best practices around that, things that you can do in knowledge management to assist in having better searches. So again, this is a really great takeaway, and we do have a two-part series, a two-part platform academy on knowledge management best practices that gets into this a little bit deeper, and I'll post that on the KMUG event. So if you want to expand on this a little bit more, but at a high level, really kind of looking at the article templates that either we've shipped, or if your organization would like to put article templates in place to just make sure that knowledge articles follow a consistent structure per knowledge base, and they are capturing the information that is needed for that knowledge article, rather than just having an empty free-form article body. We really want to guide your knowledge authors to ensure that they're capturing all the information that is needed for that knowledge article. And as Gerard mentioned earlier, certain templates may be clicked on more because they do provide the information that's needed. Certain templates may be clicked on less. That might be a good indicator that that template's not working or needs to be revised. But really just kind of having the practice of using article templates to start with is a really great starting point. So as far as, article body language, we really kind of want to put this in more of a user-centric search way. I know, sometimes if we're in the technical realm, we do want to write things from more of a technical language. Let's say that we have a knowledge article about a DNS server being down. That may not be something that users really search for. They're more than likely probably going to search for cannot navigate or cannot open to a website. So just kind of thinking about when you are looking at your titles and you're looking at your knowledge content, how would your audience go about looking for this rather than writing it from the kind of technical documentation standpoint and using that user-centric language when crafting those articles. So that goes into my third bullet point as well. Really, looking through that search lens, looking through the lens of your audience and how they're going to search for an article. when you're choosing a title, and making sure that you include search terms in the article body content as well. So that way they're picked up more, and they go to that kind of cheat sheet that Gerard spoke to earlier. Another best practice for authoring, we do suggest using screenshots and videos, really that kind of media to assist your users with your knowledge article. But you do want to keep search in mind when you do this. It's really easy just to screenshot a Word document and throw it in there rather than rewriting it. But screenshots aren't very searchable. The text is not searchable. So really keeping that in mind. When to use screenshots, when to use videos, but making sure that they don't impact your searches. And then finally, last but not least on this, again, we do have that series that really expands on this more, using clear and action-based titles for articles. Again, thinking about the search when you're defining that knowledge article title. From a governance standpoint, for looking through the search lens, relevancy, using that valid to date on a knowledge article is really important, especially when knowledge articles are ranked on when they were created and updated. If your valid to is 30 years in the future, that article may or may not get updated. The content may be the same, but it just hasn't been audited and updated, so that would float down further into your searches if other things aren't really rising it to the top, and as far as that cheat sheet and the relevancy. So using the valid to dates, you can set this at the knowledge base level actually. So your HR articles may need more of a valid to auditing cadence than other knowledge bases. So you can set it at that level, and then you can even get more granular on your knowledge articles and set the valid to dates there. So it really just depends on kind of what content you're working with and what kind of audit strategy you want for your relevancy and your valid to dates. Using ownership groups rather than authors itself, really to kind of disperse activities for approving, publishing, approving, or the validity, so going through and doing that validity audit and even feedback tasks. It's just really a lot more helpful when you have a group of owners on a knowledge article to make sure that that article is healthy, it's up to date, it's going through any kind of approvals, and that feedback for the article is being handled rather than an author, because that just puts the onus on one person. And authors can leave the company, they can move different departments. So really just getting into the best practice of using ownership groups there. The next one, article quality checklist. So we do have this in our knowledge management product, where you can use a default checklist that we've included that has been based upon KCS best practices. And this really is just a checklist for the knowledge article to go through before it's published to make sure that it is meeting those consistency standards, links aren't broken, and pertinent content has been included, and things like that before the article ever gets published. And also you can use article quality checklist in an auditing cadence as well. So if you're publishing it for the first time, it goes to that checklist. But let's say you have really high traffic articles that may even be customer facing or maybe HR facing, or just really important articles, you can implement kind of an audit cadence on that to ensure that those articles are consistently meeting those AQI checklist standards. And I know we have a bunch of questions coming in, but I'm going to get through this last slide. I know we're over time, so those questions I'll probably have to answer offline. But let's look ahead. So this is where all the safe harbor kind of comes into play on this part of the conversation, looking ahead for content generation. So looking ahead into generative AI and how that impacts knowledge management, not really from the search lens that was presented before, but when we look at generating articles, what are some things that we're going to want to keep in mind and that we can actually start doing now to get better content? So now's a really good time to look at incident and case documentation quality with your agents. Or, if the organization is not doing that, or, if there's a different team that handles that, kind of speaking to them about that through a knowledge management lens, because knowledge articles will be generated just like the summarization capabilities that we have out based upon the documentation that is an incident or a case or multiple records. And we're only as good as what is already in there. So, as far as the knowledge articles, we're only going to be as good as what work notes are in there, what comments and resolution notes and things like that. So it is really great practice to start looking at that documentation quality and making strides to improve that documentation quality before we get into the generative AI realm of knowledge management. To do that, you could think about using templates within incident and case and other records to ensure that your agents are documenting the proper steps and capturing the proper documentation or the proper information while walking them through working that incident or case. And I'll post more information on that. It's more of a broader subject, but we do have that capability, and that will help with your agents documenting within incidents and cases. Another one is to explore KCS processes to empower agents to create articles while working incidents and cases if they haven't already. We'll go into a separate session on this, but there are KCS processes in place to take information from cases and incidents, such as the KCS template, that will go ahead and put that information into the knowledge article itself. So again, if you haven't been using the KCS template, now's a really great time to explore it and what it can offer to your organization. Maybe even pilot it with a knowledge base or some groups just to get familiar with it and how it works and the benefits that it can bring you as far as capturing the information in the user's context and capturing that information during the time of interaction and how the kind of field mappings and everything work out with that template. And then going into some great resources, we do have the Consortium for Service Innovation site. So when we're talking about anything KCS, this is the group that has, really came up with the KCS framework. It's been in process over 20 years, so it's a wealth of knowledge. There's a lot of members that are on this KMUG, a lot of members that help us on the knowledge management products. We are KCS V6 verified. But if you're starting to look for thought leadership around generative AI and knowledge management, this is a great place to go and look at. They have articles out there, which I've posted on the discussion group. They have some roundtables coming up. David Kay, who has been a really great member in the community, is hosting a Gen AI for KCS webinar. It is free. It's virtual. I've linked it on the Knowledge Managers discussion group. So if you're really just wanting to start getting a broader perspective about Gen AI and knowledge management, definitely check out their articles and their free events. And if you're a member, they also have more events about this as well. For more information, look at the AI Products Hub on our community for anything Now Assist related, or even AI search, which was discussed today. So outside of that generative AI realm, just looking at AI search. And then if you want to learn more about generative AI in general, we have an introduction to generative AI course and a Now Assist Essentials course on Now Learning. So I know that was a bunch of content all at once, but we will have this recording and we will kind of distill out some of this information and get those questions answered for you on the community event itself. I do appreciate everyone hanging out a little bit later with me and hanging on to the end of this and all the great questions. And we'll get this recording posted as soon as it's edited, and we'll post another KMUG session. I'll probably do a call for topics soon. So be on the lookout on that Knowledge Managers discussion group for more information around KMUG, but also probably more discussion around the topics that we have discussed today. So with that, thank you, everyone. I'll go ahead and end this meeting, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions regarding this session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.